let's get started on today's Science, Technology, and Energy Committee continuation of an exec session. Before we start, I'd like you all to rise and join me in a moment of silence for the people who have died in Ukraine. And now remain standing while Representative Berezhny leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before we start our regularly scheduled business today, which will be comprised of a continuation of an exec session on House Bill 1469, followed by a presentation by the Eversource arborist. But before we start that activity, I'd like to just go over a couple of things that everybody here should be aware of. We have a House session on Thursday, March 10th, and the leadership team the Speaker's office has requested that you reserve Tuesday, the 15th, Wednesday, the 16th, and Thursday, the 17th for House sessions. Apparently, they're not 100% sure that we're going to be here all 3 days, but they would like you to reserve those 3 days just in case. None of our bills are being brought up this coming Thursday, so all 20 of the bills that we've exec'd, or will have exec'd by the end of today, will be heard on either Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday of next week. I don't know how they plan to spread things out. I do know in the past that when we've had a lot of bills at the end of the March session, they have tried to reverse things on one or more days so that ST&E wouldn't always be last. Sometimes we'd be first or close to the beginning of the session. So hopefully that will happen, but there's no guarantee. But I just wanted you to be aware of what the schedule looks like. Representative Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did happen to broach that question with the Speaker's office last week, and at this point they have no plans to do any reversal of the calendar. They'll keep to the scheduled, as it always has been, I guess. So, and I have one further question, Mr. Chair. Will we be having any other committee meetings here before the 29th of the month? Do you know?
That's TBD. I did talk to the clerk. He said that we could start hearing Senate bills even before crossover, provided that the Senate sends them to us. So if they do that, there is the potential we may have a session before the 29th. But as of today, I don't know of one. So if we do it, it'll be on a Monday or a Tuesday. Follow up?
Yeah, so if I may, just a general announcement. Everyone here has been contacted, but we will be having a field trip to the Seabrook Station. Everybody in this room right now has responded to me, so that's good. And those that have said that they would be attending, please watch your emails for future emails on the details, times, and information you'll have to provide and so forth.
Thank you, Representative Oxenham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Has there been any explanation of why none of our bills will be heard this week? Because this means that everything will be jammed and we will have the maximum pressure to table everything and forego proper consideration of the work that's done by the members of this committee.
Well, I have already expressed my concern to leadership that we've been tabling far too many of our bills. So they're aware of our concern about that. The reason that none of our bills were scheduled for this coming session on Thursday is because we didn't get them done on time. And I'll take full responsibility for that. I shouldn't have waited until the end to do all the exec sessions. We should have been doing exec sessions concurrently with our public hearings. That was a sort of a rookie mistake on my part. So I will take full responsibility for that and apologize to all of you for doing that. we won't make that mistake again. When we start receiving Senate bills, we'll have public hearings and exec sessions, one after the other. Maybe not right after a public hearing, but maybe the next day, so that we make sure we get all these bills adjudicated before the end of the time period, before the deadline. Representative Callie Pitts?
Is that gonna give us time to discuss the bills if we're gonna do them so quickly? I don't know what's coming up, but I know some things require discussion. So I wanna be sure that we're gonna be able to do that.
That's a good point. What we're going to do is at the conclusion of every public hearing, we're going to discuss what the next step will be. Do you want to go directly to exec session, or do you want to have a work session? What is your pleasure? And we'll decide that as a committee, and then we'll move forward with whatever that decision is. Representative Nodder?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You don't have to apologize for not having all the bills done early, because every committee is different. If you look at some of the other committees, they do the same thing. And that's why once a year in March, we have a very busy week with sometimes 3 days in a row of session. Or last term, we had that overnight session. So if you haven't been a representative till you have survived a slumber party in Reps Hall.
That's a good point. I take a lot of pride in running an efficient committee, and so that's why I apologize, because I feel I let myself and the rest of the committee down by not being quite as efficient as we could have been. It wasn't really a mistake, just a less than efficient process, and I'll address that with my performance going forward. Representative Platt?
Just to reminisce about last term when we met all night long, I was scintillating at 4 in the morning with a floor speech.
That's true, you were. You are. Scintillating Fred, that's what we call him. So it appears now that we have a substitute today for Representative McWilliams, I believe it is.
Hi, Mr. Chair. Representative Schultz?
Representative Schultz is substituting for Representative McWilliams. Welcome, Representative Schultz. We're glad to have you here today.
It's an honor to be with you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. All right. Any further questions, or Representative Oxenham?
Perhaps this is a point of order or a point of clarification. I noticed that the amendment that we are about to be considering has numerous typographical and other confusing material. Are we going to do something about that and have yet another?
Well, we're going to discuss any discrepancies that you find in the bill. We have discovered a couple ourselves, and they are the type of typos that would be corrected by OLS during the bill enrollment process. So we're not going to do anything about those unless somebody finds something that is egregious and is not a typo that would have to be addressed. So that will happen during our discussion of the amendment once we get there. Anything else? Okay, let's resume the executive session on House Bill 1469, and I recognize Representative Platt.
Yes, Mr. Chair. We passed 2022-0337H on the 28th, so I now make a motion to reconsider that vote.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded that we reconsider the vote on House Bill 1459. And I would like to know if there's any discussion on that motion.
I will just say that when this bill was drafted, it started out with the manufacturer being the responsible party, and people raised the objection, what if it's Chinese, how you go chase them? So then it was suggested we make it retailer. And then we got some feedback, well, what if the retailer's in Mexico? So now it's the installer. They're always local.
Okay, well, we can debate the merits of the amendment in just a minute, but first we have to get rid of the old amendment. So seeing that there is no further discussion on the motion to reconsider, I would urge everyone to vote yes on reconsideration and ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Thomas.
Yes.
Representative Harrington.
Yes.
Representative Nodder.
Yes.
Representative Murner. Oh, he's not here. I didn't mark that, sorry. Representative Platt votes yes. Representative Berejny.
Yes.
Representative Bernardi.
Yes.
Representative Cambrils.
Yes.
Representative Ploget.
Yes.
Representative White.
Yes.
Representative Lewicki.
Yes.
Representative Somsich is here? Okay. Where is that thing? Representative Callie Pitts has stepped out of the room. Oh, okay, you're here. Okay, and the vote was? Thank you. Representative Mann.
Yes.
Representative Oxenham.
Yes.
Representative Vincent. Not here, okay? Representative McGee.
Yes.
Representative Schultz.
Yes.
Representative Creechan's not here. Representative Pimentel. Yes. Representative Paschal. Yes. And the chair.
Yes.
Four absent, 17-4.
So by a vote of 17,
Wait a second, not, four absent, that's not, that can't make seven. Huh? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 through Cambrils. Cambrils.
I don't think you called
9,
Representative
10,
Cambrell's name, did you?
12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and that's what I have. 18, 4, and 4 missing.
Okay, so 18 having voted yay,
I'm sorry. It has to add up to 22, so there's.
It does.
18,
No, but the point is
0, 4.
18, 4, 0 against, and 4 missing.
right. So
Four
by a
absent.
vote of 18 yays, 0 nays, the motion passes.
Mr. Chair,
Representative Platt is recognized.
I move to re-adopt the amendment we just reconsidered, and hope you vote no.
Any discussion on this question? Representative Platt has moved that we re-adopt the previous amendment, the number of which I don't have right in front of me,
0337H.
0337H, and everybody is requested to vote no on that amendment. So Representative Platt, please call the roll.
Yes, okay. Representative Thomas.
No.
Representative Harrington.
No.
Representative Nodder.
No.
Representative Murner not here. I wish I knew some of this in advance to fix this thing. Representative Platt votes no. Representative Berejny.
No.
Representative Bernardi.
No.
Representative Cambrils.
No.
Representative Ploget.
No.
Representative White.
No.
Representative Lewicki.
No.
Representative Somsich not here. Representative Callie Pitts. Representative Callie Pitts. Representative Mann.
No.
Representative Oxenham.
No.
Representative McGee.
No.
Now this thing is messed up, see if I can make it work anyway. Representative Vincent's not here. Representative McWilliams. Hold on, Schultz. Yeah, hold on one second.
No.
Representative Quishen's not here. Representative Pimentel? Representative Partial? And the chair?
Yeah, no.
Representative Oxum, did I call you?
I honestly can't remember.
Your vote is?
No.
Thank you. So, this thing is screwed up. So this is, again, 18, this is, yeah, he did vote. So this is 0-18-4.
Okay, by a vote of 18 yea, 0 nay, no, by a vote of 0 yea and 18 nay, the amendment is not adopted. So the original bill is on the floor, open for further amendment. I recognize Representative Platt.
Yes, and I'll pass out the amendment. Split half. Take one yourself and pass this way. Mr. Chair, I move to adopt the amendment to HB 1459 FN. The amendment number is 2022-0940H, 0940H.
I'll second that.
Representative Platt moves and Representative Harrington seconds the adoption of Amendment 0940H, and we can now discuss this amendment. I'll recognize Representative Platt first.
As I said earlier, this wording is the same except for a couple of typos that crept in will get fixed. But I'll ask people to point out what they think is a typo. But it changes the onus, it puts the onus on the installer, who should be either local or a surrounding state at worst. Okay.
Okay, further discussion on this, Representative McGee.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Fred, it puts the onus on the installer, but it also puts the expense on the installer. I'm referring specifically to section 3 on page 2 that says the stewardship plan shall, at a minimum, describe how installers will finance the take-back and recycling system, including an adequate funding mechanism to finance the costs of collection, management, and recycling of photovoltaic modules and residuals sold in or into the state by the installer, with the mechanism that ensures that photovoltaic modules can be delivered to take-back locations without cost to the last owner or holder. And the question that I have for you, Representative Platt, is why wouldn't the cost of that recycling be on the person who owns the system? Like, because to me, they're the owner, and it could be 20, 25 years. You don't know if these companies are going to be around, and so it's very hard to structure it the way you have it structured and make it work.
I didn't follow where you were, but I heard your words. So,
Representative Platt is recognized.
sorry.
It's section 3 on page 2,
Section
lines
okay.
19 through 26.
The answer is obviously it will be on the owner, because the installer is an out-of-pocket cost. They're going to pass that on to the owner, or they're going to get some contributions from the installer or the retailer or manufacturer, but it's going to be paid for. And that cost will be passed on to the owner. It may be a discounted cost because you're collecting money now for 25 years from now. And so
Right.
it's a fund to grow. But it will be passed on to the owner one way or the other.
Follow up?
Follow up?
Yeah, that can get very complicated the way that you just described that. And I think that to me is the crux of what would be not responsible about putting this in without further information on how this would actually be enacted, because what it does is it puts the onus on the installer and says, you're going to have to figure out a way to finance this and put money aside for it and prove that you're doing that. But it doesn't really talk about, in any specific way, about the implementation, which, because of the long time differential, seems like it's very hard to make happen. I don't understand how this bill can be implemented, and to me, it looks like a real disincentive because it's gonna add costs to the installer's bottom line for a service that I thought we were trying to incent in the state.
So Representative McGee, if you look at page 2, lines 5, 6,
Yep.
et cetera, it directs the Department of Environmental Services to develop guidance for the model stewardship and take-back program. So the installers won't be tasked with creating the program themselves. They'll get guidance from DES on how to create the program. And presumably, DES would come up with a guide that every installer would follow to create those programs.
And that seems inconsistent as well, because it says by January 2024, the department shall have established the process, but it's asking the installers as of July of 2022 to begin creating programs that would be governed by guidelines that don't exist until, a year and a half later.
I believe if you look at line 20 on page 2, it specifies July 1st of 2030, not 2022.
I'm sorry, where am I looking here? Oh, it's down, except all of their, it's line 27 I'm looking at, except all of their photovoltaic modules sold in or into the state after July 2022. So that's the date I was looking at. And that's the section on stewardship plan.
Right. Representative Platt?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know who is trying to incent solar. I'm neutral. Frankly, I'm not trying to incent anything, nor am I trying to disincent. I'm trying to reflect the true cost and recover it so it doesn't wind up worse than landfills in the woods, like tires do. So I'll just leave it there.
Okay, further discussion. Representative Mann has a comment.
Yeah, I think this, I don't usually like to think of myself as negative, but I really don't like this bill at all. I think it adds cost to and disincents solar installations, which we really need to do for climate reasons, which are far exceed anything about dumps in landfills. And I would think that the bill would at least first investigate the whole issue of recycling and require, in other words, require or set up a process or procedure or responsibility for investigating the whole issue of recycling. And this bill just assumes that we don't know, but we know who's going to pay for it. And I think it's just has a very bad effect on what we really need to be getting done. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I take another comment, I want to point out that on page 3, line 22 and line 32 repeat the word installer. So it says a distributor, installer, or installer. That's the typo that OLS will fix if the bill gets to the enrollment process. So please let me know if there are any others. Representative Oxenham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are about 7 different ones where it says a installer and it should say an installer. There are 3 installer or installer references, and I can hand you an edited version. That wasn't the reason I had my hand up, however. Am I called on for a content?
Yes, let me just point out that, for example, on line 30 on page 3, it says a installer, where it probably should say an installer. That's the kind of typo that OLS would fix.
Yes.
So we don't have to worry about that. But now you're recognized to make other comments about the amendment.
This particular bill does go against stated state policy in our 10-year strategic plan and also in our statutes, in which we do incentivize renewable energy because the state does recognize that renewable energy is in fact of value to the state, its citizens, and its businesses. I don't know why we want to disincentivize a local business which provides local jobs and local opportunities. I don't know why we would want to engage in mandating a policy which has a punitive fine attached to it. This appears to be a problem a solution, excuse me, in search of a problem. We're drowning in plastic bags. We have ocean animals that are stranded on beaches. That is a problem that needs addressing. Tires were a problem, as Representative Plett pointed out, and that has been addressed. No other single industry in New Hampshire has been singled out in the fashion of this bill, and I think that that's a very bad idea. It puts a burden on our local businesses, and as much as I am in favor of extended producer responsibility, that is the way to go. Redesign the product so it minimizes the waste. But we don't do that in this way. And as a final point, not only are our installers having to pay for the things that are mentioned on page 2, but on page 4, I believe it's page 4. Yes, page 4. They're also funding the Department of Energy, with this taking care of these costs. So on all these matters, I find this. Where does it say that? If you look at Roman numeral 8, and you get about several sentences down, it says, okay, maybe it's further down. There's hereby
Actually,
established that
lines
the
1 and 2 on page 4 say the department may collect a flat fee from participating installers to recover costs associated with the plan, guidance, review, et cetera, et cetera.
And it goes on. There are many things in here that are costs for the department that the installers are now going to have to pay. And they're sufficiently vague that I can see other costs also being put on their back.
Representative Plett?
I just pointed out it's not the Department of Energy, it's the Department of Environmental Services.
Whichever. It's a state department, and it's administrative costs that would not be burdensome for any other industry, but only this one.
Representative Oxenham, would you see this as being any different than the costs imposed on utilities when they visit the site evaluation committee to submit a project to the committee for consideration?
We will have an opportunity to talk about the site evaluation committee, and the short answer is no, and you probably don't want the long answer today.
Okay, thank you. I would argue that it is very similar. Representative Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is a bill that has great foresight. We know that there will be a problem. We know there is a problem because we know that we have some issues now, but we know in the long run it's going to be a bigger problem. Why not try to come up with a solution that helps a problem that we know about instead of, the old proverbial kicking the can down the road? It kind of surprises me that if it's a project that someone is not interested in, then they're okay with things, but if it's a project that they are interested in, is not okay with things. I think we should attack any problem we see having to do with the recycling and landfills, whether or not it's our favorite project or not. So I believe this bill was fashioned after a state, a very, very environmentally conscious state, if I do say so. And I would like to hear from the sponsor how a bill of this type has been accepted and how it's been working in the state that this bill was fashioned after.
My understanding, it's the state of Washington, and my understanding, it was working quite well as originally drafted, manufacturer. So the changes we made would make it even better. And Washington State is not alone. I mean, California has rules, not law, but rules to do the same thing. And there's several other states who are investigating this to eventually do the same thing, including, as I recall from my testimony, Rhode Island and a few others.
Any follow-up, Representative Thomas?
Just that if a problem exists, a problem exists. Whether it involves an industry that we're in favor of or an industry that we're not in favor of, I think if the problem exists, we should have the foresight to try and do something about it up front. Even it may take time to perfect it, but I think now is the time to have the conversation. So I'm in favor of this bill in one form or another to get the conversation going. I think it's an issue that we need to address, and right now we have time to perfect it. We don't have time when someone says we should have done this 10 years ago. So I'd be in favor of this bill.
Thank you. Representative Plett, you said that Washington State has rules to implement this program. Doesn't the bill on page 4, line 23, call for the department to adopt rules for the administration of the subdivision?
Well, I didn't say that Washington State has rules. I said Washington State has a law that this was modeled after. But in that law, it refers to their equivalent department developing rules, as does this one. I said California has rules.
My mistake, thank you. Okay, further discussion. Representative Partial.
Yes, I would love to be corrected if I oh, thank you, Chair. I'd love to be corrected if I'm mistaken, but I believe Washington State, their implementation of solar recycling is done as part of a comprehensive plan of producer responsibility, which incorporates a number of different recycling areas, including the solar panels. And it does not single out solar panels per se. I know there is a bill out there that does single it out, but I think they're attacking the problem in a comprehensive way, which I would prefer, because I don't see a lot of solar panels in our woods, but I do see a lot of tires in our woods.
Representative Plett.
Yes, I addressed this in my testimony. A lot of the small stuff, tires, there's a program at DTW's transfer stations to pick this stuff up at reasonable cost. I disposed of the computer I was using here for $5, and so there's not big out-of-pocket cost. Tires aren't that expensive, but there were still some scofflaws who dump them in the woods. I also said that the reason the solar panels are being picked out is because a lot of other technologies go to the Site Evaluation Committee, and the Site Evaluation Committee requires end-of-life disposal of some sort, certainly a nuclear plant. But wind turbines have to have a disposal plan as well. But these solar panels are smaller, bigger than the local electronics, but smaller than that scale. So that's why this is, if you call it singled out, it's something that needs to be fixed. And frankly, when we start making progress with this, I might come back someday and say for power batteries that might need a program as well. But that's something for a future day.
Representative Callie Pitts.
I want to thank Representative Plett for bringing this to us. However, I think when this came in, or when this came to us, there was not the urgency, I think, that we feel now. This bill was conceived before this current situation. We are in a situation now where all kinds of fuel are going to be in short supply, electricity being one. We don't want to put any more of a burden on the people who are installing or the people who are buying these panels. The average life of a panel is about 30 years, and it starts to deteriorate somewhere around 20. We only really began doing serious work in the 2000s. I think this bill is worthwhile. I think we have to plan for facilities to recycle this, because transporting this material to a recycling center, there's one in Chicago, takes care of the Midwest, in Illinois, I didn't say Chicago, in Illinois, a big one, and it does all kinds of electronics, including panels. There's a lot to be gained from doing this, but I think the timing, like everything else, is not right now. And I think this is worthy subject. I think maybe in the next 6 months, next year, we should be looking at it. We should all be thinking about it and thinking about where we can put these recycling plants, and thinking about the actual cost of what it's really going to be to recycle materials. It's not easy to send a ship over to Africa anymore or to India. We have to do it right here, and we have to plan to do that. And I think that's what we need to do. And this bill right now would put an additional burden. Nuclear had a plan because nobody knew what to do with nuclear fuel. And there's quite a bit of money in there for decommissioning. But now we know we have another 30 years. So I just think that the bill is worthy, but not now. This is not the time to put a hammer on an industry that we hope will grow and grow even more. And if it does, then we have 30 years to take care of the problem.
Representative Pimentel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I agree. This is a problem that we need to solve, but we do not need to solve it now. We have this subject deserves to be in a study committee so that we can look at it more deeply, come out solutions. I personally think the solution is going to be at the federal level, not at the state level. And I would recommend getting a hold of our state representative, our representatives in Washington, and let them know that this is an important subject. What I don't like about it is that it is directed only at solar panels. There are so many other things that we need to recycle which are just as dangerous. We also don't know what the expense is going to be for recycling 30 years from now. I suspect that instead of costing us money, there may be value in those panels. And so what do we do now? Should we start paying the installers for installing a product that's going to be worth some money at the end of their life? I don't think so. So why don't we just look into this a little bit more, determine what the real costs are going to be, and I suppose you could call it kicking it down the road, but I don't think we're ready for this. I think it's a bad bill at the wrong time.
Thank you, Representative Mann.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I have the same opinion. I also feel that, as a previous representative, I also feel that with a little time, we might have some idea about what the implications are. Perhaps a lot of these panels will be moved and used in other facilities. Maybe we'd take our panels off every 10 years and some farmer would have a growing wall on his barn that is full of old panels. I mean, it's just, the whole problem is we're not understood. You don't know what the problem looks like. You don't know how things will work out. You don't know what kind of solutions will be available in the 20 to 30 year time frame we have, apparently.
Thank you. Representative Oxenham had her hand up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've handed out a handout before the beginning of this meeting, which is an advertisement from one particular company that is called We Recycle Solar. They have a nationwide service. They handle every need from PV panels to energy storage, blah, blah, blah. Because this is a profitable industry with financial return. I don't see the reason for the state to be sticking its nose in here. I don't see the reason for a mandate. And I think that if we don't ITL the bill, I think I would support my fellow representatives who suggest interim study.
Thank you. Representative Bernardi is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to take a contrary point of view. I think it is time for us to take a stand on moving these kinds of programs forward. I think, as Representative Plett has mentioned, this is a initial stand on an issue which we shouldn't be kicking down the road. It can be built upon for dealing with battery issues, which are also going to raise a significant problem in the future, or already are in various landfills, or light bulbs containing mercury, or other things which are difficult to recycle and difficult to manage in local landfills. We need to to initiate this kind of a process. This is a good first step. We can make course corrections and additions as needed.
Thank you, Representative Partial.
Yes, thank you, Chair. To Representative Kelly Pitt's point, with futures market and petroleum skyrocketing, I'm seeing anything we do right now to stabilize our energy market as being critical. And that means supporting both renewable and non-renewable energy. I see this as a crisis situation, and I don't want to put the thumb on any particular industry by saying we're going to restrict how we're going to produce energy. I think it's critical. To John Mann's point, solar panels, they don't have the built-in obsolescence from my observation. They don't have that built-in obsolescence that many of our products that are cluttering our landfill have. And even at the end of their life, they still are producing. And they are built to survive, unlike the printer in my office right now. So by placing a thumb on the local solar industry, I think it's engaging in bad economics and making New Hampshire less competitive in regard to other states. I wish we could send this to interim study. Thank you.
Representative Callie Pitts.
One of the other things that I think is really important is that we should be looking on a regional level to establish recycling facilities. I can't imagine what it's going to cost to ship materials, panels, computers, and what it costs to send it to Chicago or to send it to Washington State or to send it to Arizona. When these recycling facilities are built, they don't just recycle one thing. They recycle many things. And the recycling of solar panels in particular is very important because of what they can gain from it. There is value in that material. More value than is in, you know, we used to say what the human body was worth. Now it's worth about 32 cents. There's a lot of value in that material. And so many companies are interested in buying that. So there are many different ways. Cities and towns, I believe, have to figure out how to charge for this. Maybe $5 is unreasonable, too little. Maybe $50 is too much. Maybe added installation cost right now is a hammer that we don't need. But I think a regional solution, and I think we could instruct very easily, not instruct, we could ask DES to look at the situation and look how much would it cost to have a regional recycling facility for the New England states or maybe beyond. That would be worth money to the company that's going to do that. And I think that right now, us putting that kind of money on anybody, and I don't know how much it would cost. We don't know how much it would cost or add to the installation. And right now, people are choking to death. And I'm going to tell you that from personal experience. You know, I used to love to take a ride up to the mountains and just look at the beauty of this state. I don't do that anymore. I don't think I can do that anymore. If gas goes up another 50 cents, you know, for some people, that's a lot of money. So the thought of putting in a solar panel and having those prices go way up, I think, and we don't know how much right now, is inexpedient. I don't think this should be killed. I think it should be put into interim study. And I believe that interim study is truly that.
Thank you, Representative Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would think, I'd like to correct my good friend from Portsmouth. I think due to inflation, I think the human body is probably worth $100 now compared to all the inflation we're having. But I would like to state, I would like to state one thing though. If we don't pass this bill now, it is my opinion that this discussion dies. If we pass this bill, we can have further discussion and we can perhaps come up with perhaps a better plan. But if we don't pass this bill now, the discussion will die. I feel it because people want to kick this can down the road. I think the discussion needs to begin now. Perhaps a study might come out of it, but we need to pass it in order to have more discussion by the next level of our friends. So I'm in favor of voting for this bill.
The committee will be in order, please. Representative McGee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just taking in all the comments that have been made, and I want to go back to Representative Thomas's comment about this being a visionary bill. I think we've already discussed several times that there's a difference of opinion on the committee about what the vision should be for energy policy coming out of this committee. And I would argue that our solar uptake or our solar penetration in New Hampshire is extremely low because we haven't fully supported the adoption of solar in the state. And that has everything to do with the policies that we put in place and the objectives that we have. Many of us think that the can that's been kicked down the road is the warming of the atmosphere and its effects on everything else. We also have a difference of opinion about how to go about creating the appropriate mix of energy. And so what this bill does, though, is it takes an energy source that is a non-emitting source that has helped New Hampshire have an energy portfolio diversity. We were trying, 15 years ago, the discussions were around increasing our portfolio diversity so that we didn't have all our eggs in one basket in gas or oil or coal. And we've kind of fallen off having any discussions around what our objectives are, and we're sort of backpedaling on the pieces of our portfolio pie that create that clean diversity that was the objective in the past. So rather than increasing that section, we're adopting policies that take us in the other direction and make us more fossil fuel dependent. And so I would say that's the opposite of visionary, because what we're saying is that it's okay for us to go down the road of adopting more fossil fuel dependence at a time when the costs there are going up. And I don't think that that does a service to the people that we represent, because portfolio diversity was the way we were keeping our costs down, because we were allowing people to have competition in the market and options for how they got their energy solved. So I just want to say that that's the context in which I view the bill, which is that when you add costs to something, to a market that's costs have been coming down in terms of their ability to compete, then you move the decisions in the other direction. And I think that is the can that we do not want to kick down the road. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you. I'd remind you, the members, that one part of the vision is, in my belief, and has to be, nuclear energy. And we did pass a bill earlier this session to study how we can acquire more nuclear energy in our state. Any further discussion? Representative Mann.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're supposed to pay in advance for recycling when we put the panels up. And my question would be, how in the heck do we know what the recycling costs are going to be? I mean, it seems to me that just to implement this, it really needs to be put into an interim study so we have some idea what we're talking about when we talk about prepayment for all of the recycling needs. I don't see how that can be escaped. And
Thank you.
I don't, frankly, Mr. Chairman, I don't know whether, I'm not familiar, I know this is, I might be completely wrong, but I'm surprised at how much you participate in debates and whether, as a chairman, that's appropriate.
Of course it's appropriate. I'm a member of this legislature. I represent my constituents. I'm entitled to debate issues that are relevant to my constituents. Is there
It's
any
not-
further
it's
discussion on this issue?
All I'm saying is it's not familiar to me. Thank you.
You're welcome. Representative Lewicki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have questions, 2 points, really, one of which is I asked earlier when we were discussing the bill, what is the value of the components? And the other thing is that in a lot of cases, what we're doing is essentially moving pollution to someplace else. We do that with some of our, hydro generation. We do the same thing when we're buying things from China, where it's the Wild West, and there's no real control over the environmental issues, and it's a real question. And I believe that we can put it into dollars and cents. We may be able to understand it better.
Thank you. Further discussion? Representative Platt.
In answer, I can't answer because I'm not expert at the cost of this, of taking this stuff apart, and the value of the different rare elements that are in the rare earth elements in there listed in the bill. That's something for experts to do, but it's something that needs to be tackled.
Representative Oxenham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just go back to the advertisement. There are lots and lots of very valuable things in these panels, and there are businesses who it is their business model to reclaim them in a sustainable way. It is profitable and responsible to do that. We don't need to step in with the state. We don't need to step in with mandates.
Thank you, Representative Oxenham. One would assume that a stewardship plan would certainly include that kind of activity. It seems like at this point that we're going around and around and making the same arguments over and over, and we are nearing the end of our allocated time. So I would like to call the question and have Representative Callie Pitts have the final word before we do that.
It's not the final word. I think everybody knows how I feel. I just had a real question. When a panel is removed from a roof, does that panel have to be removed by a person who is licensed? I don't know if there's damage on that roof. And wouldn't it be the person who takes that panel off who might be responsible for what to do with it? I have never seen a panel in action, but I know that they're connected to the electricity system. So do we have to have someone who is responsible and licensed do that? And then wouldn't it be more appropriate for that person who is removing that panel to take care of it? I don't know if many people just rip them down themselves. Thank you.
Representative Platt.
I imagine there's all sorts of scenarios out there. Generally, an electrician is required to fool around with electricity, but for a homeowner, that's not necessarily so. They can go do that. The point is there'll be funds available to recycle these properly at the end of life. And if the homeowner does damage to his or her roof, she or he does damage to the roof. But hopefully somebody responsible will take that down. And knowing the fund is there, they'll do the right thing.
Okay, so having given Representative Callie Pitts the last word on this question, I'm going to call the question on the amendment, or the motion rather, to adopt Amendment 0940H and ask the clerk to call the roll.
Yes. Representative Thomas.
Yes.
Representative Harrington.
Yes.
Representative Nodder.
Yes.
Representative Myrner is not here. See, if I had a chance to mark these up in advance, let's see.
You're next.
I know, but I got to take care of this first. Representative Platt says yes. Representative Berejny.
Yes.
Representative Bernardi.
Yes.
Representative Cambrils.
Yes.
Representative Ploget.
Yes.
Representative White.
Yes.
Representative Lewicki.
Yes.
Representative Somsich is not here. Representative Callie Pitts.
No.
Representative Mann.
No.
Representative Oxenham.
No.
Representative Vincent is not here. Representative McGee.
No.
Representative Schultz.
No.
Representative Critchin not here. Representative Pimentel. No. Representative Partial.
No.
And the chair.
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, lucky. 12-4. Huh? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I agree with the 7. Let's see. Huh? 4. 11, 7, 4.
Okay, by a vote of 11 yea and 7 nay, the amendment is adopted, and the chair recognizes Representative Plett for a motion.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I move to adopt House Bill 1459 FN as amended.
Representative Nodder is recognized.
I second the motion.
It's moved and seconded that we adopt House Bill 1459 FN as amended by Amendment 0940H. I'd ask the clerk to call the roll on the question.
I had to get the right roll call. Okay, Representative Thomas,
Yes.
Representative Harrington,
Yes.
Representative Nodder,
Yes.
Representative Murner is not here. Representative Plett votes yes. Representative Berejny,
Yes.
Representative Bernardi,
Yes.
Representative Cambrils,
Yes.
Representative Ploget,
Yes.
Representative White,
Yes.
Representative Lewicki,
Yes.
Representative Somsich is not here. Representative Callie Pitts, Representative Mann,
No.
Representative Oxenham,
No.
Representative Vincent is not here. Representative McGee,
No.
Representative Schultz,
No.
Representative Creechin is not here. Representative Pimentel. No. Representative Paschal,
No.
and the chair.
Yes.
$11 to 7 to 4.
By a vote of 11 yeas and 7 nays, the motion to adopt House Bill 1459 FN as amended passes. So, we will now, before we close the executive session, I will point out that Representative Pimentel has already written the minority report. It's an excellent report. And Representative Plett will write the majority report. And with that, we close the public hearing on House Bill 1459, and we will take a very brief 3-minute bio break before we move on to our presentation from Eversource. So be back here in your chairs in 3 minutes, please.
Mr. Chair, so there's no other votes going on today in this committee, correct?
That is correct. The only order of business going forward is a presentation from Eversource.
My time here was brief, but I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Well, we enjoyed having you. Thank you for being here. Okay, folks, let's resume our activity. Please take your seats. Okay, thank you, everybody. And we would like to now welcome to Science, Technology, and Energy the arborist from Eversource, and Ms. Gamache will introduce him to our committee.
Thank you. Very briefly, with me is probably one of the most popular employees at Eversource because he's very passionate about what he does. Bob Allen, manager of Vegetation Management. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Donna. That's about the best introduction I've ever had, except for the time I had to do myself when the speaker wasn't there. So thank you for having me. What I wanted to do was talk a little bit about Eversource's vegetation management program. And I brought some handouts today for you. But this PowerPoint that I put together gives us some background on what we do with the program and maybe give you some idea of some of the things we're up against and some of the things that we help out on in the state. So if everybody's ready, the first slide is it's the Eversource franchise territory. So 13,220 square mile operational area. We have 40,000 miles of overhead line across 3 states, 500 communities. So we're on about a 4 to 5 year cycle across the 3 states. So that means we're doing 10,000 miles a year of trimming. 36 employees, we just bumped that up. We're about 42 right now, internal. And 475 contractor tree crews working across Connecticut, Mass, and New Hampshire every day. A forest cover, so percent tree cover state rank. This is something that the U.S. Forest Service does every 10 years or so, and it goes back and forth between New Hampshire and Maine as number 1. I preferred New Hampshire to be number 1, so that's where they are on this particular slide. Connecticut's number 5, and Massachusetts number 6. Not everybody would think of that as being those heavily forested areas, but it's based on an aerial photo, and it's the cover, the percent of forest cover. And then the wildland urban interface rank is Connecticut number 1, Massachusetts number 2, and New Hampshire number 4. And that speaks to how close is forested area or natural area to where people live. Connecticut's a very densely populated small state, and so where there is forest, it's very close to where there's people living. But Massachusetts, same thing, and New Hampshire's number 4 on that. So what we like to say is this means our customers live amongst the trees. Of those 10,000 miles we do every year, we believe there's 175 trees per mile when we trim. And a mile for this argument or statistic is 30 pole sections. So if you were to go down the street and count 30 pole sections, in general, that's about a mile. Sometimes it's 20, sometimes it's 40, but we go with 30. So 175 trees on average every mile of line we're trimming. So that gives you over 7 million trees for maintenance each cycle. But the thing that we've all experienced is an outage caused by the weather in a tree is there's 3 to 4 times that number in the fall zone. So what's the fall zone? It's a 50-foot tree 40 feet from the wires. That would be considered in the fall zone. So that's 21 million trees on any given day that could fall and hit our wires. So when you go through an outage, please try and remember me and trying to take care of those 21 million trees. So the mission, I don't want to bore you with too much stuff, but what we're trying to do is effectively plan, schedule, and manage services so that we can take care of the trees that are going to affect our wires and therefore affect our customers. We have best management practices for our T and D line clearance, and T is transmission, D is distribution. Transmission is over hill and dale, the big lines. Distribution will be the lines that come from the substation down the roads and then into your house. We develop customer relations practices that deploy multi-channel communication, community outreach to facilitate field execution of vegetation management activities. What that says is once in a while we put a picture on Facebook and tell you that we're doing a good job. We hire arborists. Everybody goes to school for trees that we hire. Some of them might be wildlife ecology, some might be environmental science, but we're hiring arborists. So our tree people are looking after the tree people that are doing the work. So we're very proud of our professionalism on that. And then lastly, we have performance metrics, and those are called SAIDI and SAFE. We love acronyms in the utility world, and I'll get to explaining what those are in a couple slides. So managing the business of vegetation management, and these circles pretty much tell you what we're up against every day and what we're trying to manage every day. So that's customer satisfaction. If the customers are happy, then you folks are probably not hearing from them, and that's a good thing. Reliability, usually people are happy when the power is reliable. Storm resiliency, if the storms don't knock us out for as long as they used to before we had the projects the way we do with good infrastructure building and really an aggressive tree program that we didn't have prior to the 2008 ice storm. Compliance, quality control, cost control are all things that I deal with every day, and as do our arborists. So on the next slide, it's the key reliability metrics. And as I said, SAFE and SAIDI. So SAFE, if I break it down, it's, and I'm sorry I didn't number these slides, I should have, make it easier when I'm zipping through them, but SAFE is System Average Interruption Frequency Index. I didn't learn anything about that in tree school. And then number of tree trouble spots, and then SAIDI would be System Average Interruption Duration Index. So looking at the graphs, the red was the 2021 target. And the blue was the deep blue was the 2021 actual. So we didn't make our goal last year. And that's unfortunate, but we did have a good year. The problem is we're very much a continuous improvement company. And in 2019, we had our best year ever for reliability. Some of that's climate, some of it's storms not being as bad, some of it's our trimming program. But we improved by 40% over our previous best year. So now when you put a goal 2 years later, it's not gonna be easy to get that goal. So. Vegetation impact on reliability are tree-related outages. So 45% of outages on distribution are due to vegetation. Across 3 states, that's 20,000 outages a year. And 90% of outages during storms are due to trees. But looking at this tree-related SAFE on this particular bar graph, it shows that our target was the blue line, and from 2016 on, and that's when we really started investing in our strategy of taking down hazard trees, we've really improved our target. And again, 2019 stands out as the best year ever. So that speaks to the amount of trees in the fall zone that we hadn't been looking to get in the past, but now we're looking deep for trees. We have key internal partners. Obviously, we work with everybody. Anybody that's doing line work, the substations, engineering when they're going to build a new line or trying to improve a line, construction projects. Tree folks are usually the first ones in and oftentimes one of the last ones out. Corporate relations, certainly regulatory affairs and community relations, media relations, corporate communications, my good friend Donna Gamache, and customer care, supply chain, environmental affairs. So I put this little blurb in there about millions of Connecticut trees have been killed or damaged in recent years. Taking them down is expensive. So I've worked in Connecticut and in Mass and up in New Hampshire. I've been here 13 years working in this job. I've been with the company for 35 years. And Connecticut and Massachusetts have different rules as far as the way the roads are laid out. And I'm probably gonna be overgeneralistic here. But in Connecticut and Mass, most roads are 3-rod roads. A rod would be 16.5 feet in a kind of an ancient measurement. So 3-rod road would be 16.5 times 3, 49.5 feet, let's say 50 feet. And that's in New Hampshire too. A lot of them are 3-rod roads. However, in Connecticut and Massachusetts, about 90% of the time, those roads are owned by the town or the city. In New Hampshire, it's almost the direct opposite. We don't have as many roads that are owned that way. So in that 3 rods in Connecticut and Massachusetts, there's 25 to 30 feet of traveled way, 10 feet on either side for a snow shelf, sidewalk, tree belt, whatever you want to call it. Those trees in there are owned by the town. and therefore they have a tree warden in each town in Connecticut and Massachusetts. In New Hampshire, we don't have that situation. More often than not, if I lived across from the chairman, you would own 25 feet to the center of the road, and I would own 25 feet to the center of the road, and the town would have an easement over our property, and those trees would actually be mine and yours. So it's a little bit different when we look at that. But the reason I put this in there is what happened down there was the drought. We had a horrible drought in 2016, 2017. They have emerald ash borer, which has now been in New Hampshire for a few years, and the whole state's in, it's not a quarantine anymore, the whole state's got it, every county. They had gypsy moth, which I just found out last week is not the correct term anymore. It's now called spongy moth, because gypsy is not politically correct. So, which is fine. 40 years in this business, I got to start calling a bug spongy now. I know, then we'll have trouble. So the spongy moth, the emerald ash borer, and the drought contributed to thousands of trees that died in Connecticut. And Eversource doesn't own any trees. As I stated, the trees that are owned, they're owned by either the town or the property owner. So we worked really hard to try and work with the states and the towns to work together and take these trees down. So oftentimes we're working on one side of the road where the wires are, but there's dead trees on the other side too. And they can fall over and hit us. And so we've tried to partner with the state and the town whenever possible. Some towns are easier to partner with than others. Some states are easier to partner with than others. I've always been very successful up here partnering with New Hampshire. And that's the reason I'm here. I like it. And but I wanted you to know that that's something that's going on. Emerald ash borer is a big problem in New Hampshire. It's gotten worse every year. If you listen to Kyle Lombard, who's the state forest health insect specialist, he says that 30% of the urban forest is ash in New Hampshire. 6% of the forest is ash, but so we've got a lot of trees out there by the roads that are failing.
Quick question for
Yeah.
you. Does that ash borer kill the trees?
Yes.
It does, okay.
So what it does is it bores in. It's a flathead borer, so it comes out with a like a half moon looking shaped hole. When it comes out, it's not a round hole. So it comes out and its young live inside the galleries that it's developed, and that stops the phloem from going up. So similar like the Dutch elm disease was a vascular disease, emerald ash borer can do the same problem, can cause the same problem. So trees die within 2 to 3 years. You notice it by something called blonding, and maybe you guys have seen this, but woodpeckers go after the bugs that are inside, and they go pretty much in a straight line, and you'll see the bark turn from gray to yellowish. So if you see blonding on an ash, you know you've got emerald ash borer. So the woodpeckers are pretty smart when it comes to food. So again, I don't know. I know some pockets of areas in the state where there's problems with it already, but I think it's going to grow into a bigger problem.
If,
Yes.
if I may, so you notice you have one tree that's got the blonde. Do you call someone to get rid of it, or do you just let it grow?
Good question. So you want to get rid of it if you can. What we used to have to do was chip it and either leave it right there or take it to a spot where it couldn't cross county lines. Now, every county has it, so it's not as much of an issue. I'd hate to say this, but the ashes are going to be difficult to save as a species with this particular bug. There's certainly ones you can say, this one is really important to us, we want to save it, and we're going to pay to do whatever necessary. Yes?
I don't know if you need this or not. The pine borer out west
Yes.
is a similar situation.
Yes.
But I understand that the pine borer, its reproductive life used to be that's one season, one mating.
Yeah.
And now with the extended summers, it's one summer, 2 matings.
Yeah.
Twice as many insects. Is your emerald ash borer a similar situation as far as you're aware?
That's a great question. As far as I know, not yet. It potentially could be, but I think they overwinter as eggs or larvae in the tree, and then they come out. So I think they have to overwinter for 1 year. But I'm not sure of that. I'll look that up.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other insect bug questions? Yeah.
If you said if you chip one of the affected trees,
Yeah.
does the larvae and the eggs still stay on the floor and
It
they
does.
go to other trees?
They can't leave really, so you chip it into one pile and they just are staying there and
stay
probably
there.
not gonna live.
Okay.
That's the thought process, but, yes.
Go ahead, Fred.
Is there any predator, any controlling, another bug that would control the first one?
Yeah, so there's always natural predators for these types of things. We haven't been able to release anything yet on emerald ash borer that has made a difference. There are other things such as purple loosestrife, which is a invasive species that we've seen in the state for years, and the state has actually, Doug Saigan from invasive species has actually released a bug that will eat that. So it's we've done a good job of controlling that way, but it's hard to find a predator for every bug. Because there's always something else that's easier to eat than a bug that's inside a tree. So,
Representative Lewicki?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What about resistant strains of the actual tree? Because my neighborhood, they've all been gotten, except one that I planted about 30 years ago, and it seems to be doing okay.
that's fantastic. I maybe can market that one. No, it's always something that you see that there's some natural resistance. There's still elm trees around, even though Dutch elm swept through this country over the last 8 decades. There's still occasional elm trees that you see. So, but I don't know of any strain that's necessarily a species or a cultivar that's been come up with yet on the market that is a ash that's resistant. Yep.
Representative Partial?
I could add to that question, knowing that in my nearby city of Keene, there is a farm who specializes in resistant Dutch elm seedlings, and you can buy a Dutch elm seedling from them. But it's a matter of a number of years to reforest a situation like that.
The Elm Research Institute in Keene was one of the groups that was doing it for years, and also chestnuts. They're trying to that's come back a long ways, but we lose these species because of global commerce. I think we bring more bugs in. So, all right, let me go back to this. It's a little more boring than what we were just talking about, but. So this talks about our regulatory programs, and basically what I said was it's 4 to 5 years in Massachusetts, 4 to 5 years in New Hampshire, and then 4 years in Connecticut. And the hardest thing to get that work done is there is nobody new coming into this business. This is not a well-paid, it's not even a profession in a lot of people's minds, being a tree guy. And we've fought this for the 40 years I've been involved in it. The pay just isn't there, and we find it harder and harder to get people in. I went to Stockbridge School of Agriculture in UMass, graduated in 1982. There were 62 people in my major of arboriculture. This year there's 4. So Thompson School went through a similar situation, so it's just difficult. Everybody wants to have an easier job. You got to work outside 12 months a year and with a chainsaw, usually a loft, and so. But if you're passionate about it, or you like it, or you want to be outside and you don't want somebody yelling at you, or if they yell at you, you can just rev the chainsaw a little more so you don't have to hear them. So our distribution programs, as I said, we love acronyms. So SMT is Scheduled Maintenance Trimming, and that's what we do every day. That's our program where we trim 10,000 miles a year across Eversource. And in New Hampshire, that's going to be around 2,600 miles this year. Enhanced tree trimming, which is along our backbone lines, which have the most customers affected. Those lines are cut and cleared at a greater expanse. Reliability tree work is something we came up with in Massachusetts. We don't do it in New Hampshire yet. Regular tree removal, we're looking for hazard and risk trees. Right-of-way maintenance, again, we're going over hill and dale and we're mowing and climbing trees in that area. Mid-cycle is usually, for us, it's usually vines that bother us between the cycles. And again, we have the vine program also. Yes?
Yes, go ahead, Fred.
Having been a former employee 100 years ago, I do know that most of your distribution, a lot of your distribution is 34.5 kV.
Yes.
As opposed to other states around us that might be 12 or even 4 kV, which does that mean more of it is subject to enhanced tree trimming? You've got more customers on a line and more chance for interruption because there's more customers on a line.
So that higher voltage, whether it's the 34.5 or 23, but you're right, most states around us do not have 34.5 on the roadside. But it's from, our backbone is considered from the source, usually the substation, down to the first operating device, which could be a fuse or a recloser or something. So any customers in that area is where we're getting the higher clearance zone, because we can impact so many more people. If we lose the line there, that's going to be a big outage. So, but good question.
Callie Pitts?
I'm not a tree expert. All I like with trees is the shade and the fruit they bear. But what concerns me is you are an arborist and you say there's not many coming, but the contractors that are hired by the company are just, I don't know how to say it, choppers. And is that where some of the controversy comes in? That have you looked at every place that needs to be trimmed, or has somebody of your caliber looked at every place that needs to be trimmed, and then you rely on your contractors to follow your directives, and that doesn't always happen?
So yeah, I think like any profession, there's always going to be a day where somebody's not having their best day. So that can happen, but the contractors bid on our work. We give them the specifications. And then it led right into the next slide, which is great. So it's our distribution programs, which show 8 feet to the side of the wires, 10 feet below the wires, and 15 feet above the wires. And our wires are always on the top of the pole. Electric wires are always on the top. Phone wires are always on the bottom, and then could be cable or a fire or something in between, but we're always on the top. So we do 100% quality control audits. If the work was trimmed this year, we're out there and looking at it. And we have, well, it'll be March 31st. Everything has to be looked at from 2021 by March 31st is the way we do it. So you can't, obviously, if you're trimming on December 20th, you're not going to be able to get out there and look at it if you're looking at stuff from November's trimming. So we give ourselves a couple months to take care of it. And then we send the contractor back to fix anything that we find. We call it a go back. Anything that hits the go back list, or the punch list as we might call it also, is something that's done on their nickel. We don't pay for it. They have to go back and do it. And these specifications, as I oftentimes tell the guys, haven't changed since 1986. A lot of the trimmers were born since then, so they've only known this specification. But it seems like sometimes they struggle with it. So yeah, it's a profession, or it's a craft that they're trying to learn, and some guys have tougher days than other guys. Some guys are better at it than other guys. So, but we look at 100% of everything. So if there's a problem and we haven't heard about it from our customers, we'll find it when we're out there inspecting stuff. So. Our ETT, is enhanced tree trimming, and that is required to get permission from the landowner. And oftentimes people want their trees down. And they want the free firewood. They want to lose the risk of the tree coming down. They've been dealing with the leaves or the acorns, or they're dropping something every day. And if they're on a backbone line, as I said, we're looking to take those trees down if they're a hazard to us. Oftentimes they're a hazard because of their species, because of their proximity, because of the soil they're growing in, or other issues that might have happened to them. But we're looking at, for ETT, we do about 50 miles a year out of those 2,500. Next slide, we have tree removals. This is over 50,000 trees removed annually. That's across 3 states. But you can see some of those trees that we have marked on the left-hand system, or left-hand side, have ribbons on them. We generally use blue and white ribbons now. They're checkered. And the reason we've done that is because lots of people put, if we were using orange, they'll put orange on theirs and hope that we're going to take it down. So blue and white is not as easy to find, and it's expensive, so we use, or more expensive than the other stuff, so we use that now.
So quick question.
Yes.
What happens to 50,000 trees is a lot of trees. What happens to all the wood? Is it chipped? Is it, how do you deal with it?
So a lot of times we have people trying to get their pickup truck right underneath it before we take it down, and we usually don't have any problem getting rid of the wood. Even now with, we used to have problems with white pine, because not anybody wanted to burn that, but now with the wood boilers, those folks will burn anything. Maple producers, they don't mind it. Usually they have their own sources, but if we're nearby, they'll take some wood from us. some of it goes, we can't sell it, and we don't have any interest in selling it. We want it to be given away or have somebody use it. We have explored what's known as wood banks, and we've delivered wood to wood banks. There's one in Antrim a few years ago we did, and it used to be a thing in Connecticut where they were taking homeless men, taking them off the street at a thing called Open Hearth, and they were giving them a chance to become part of society again by cutting and splitting wood and then delivering it and selling it. So we were donating wood to the Open Hearth, and it was a big program. They had to manage the whole thing, give these folks places to stay and feed them. But they earned money and they became part of the society again. We've never really found a way to do that in any other state. It's a big undertaking. And in New Hampshire, where a lot of people burn wood, and I burn 7 or 8 cords a year, and I buy it. I don't get it for free. But there's always somebody who wants the wood. And as far as the chips, our chips are very popular with folks that have berry bushes, blueberries especially. Christmas tree farms like them. And one of the things that's happened in my 40 years of doing this is people have started to go away from wanting the black mulch or the red mulch or that's got dye in it. They want natural stuff. It's really native oriented now. So our chips are becoming more popular, even though they're not landscape quality and they might be a little messy at times. There might be some twigs in there or something, but it's better because the organic matter is going right back into the soil. So we're finding more outlets for that. It's a great question, though. Distribution programs are right-of-way maintenance, and if I'm taking too long, please let me know. I'm happy to stay here all day. But so we're not using herbicide in New Hampshire. The other utilities do. We haven't for going on 3 or 4 decades now. So we just mow with what's known as a Brontosaurus by John Brown Company out of Goffstown. They created the machine, and most of our contractors use it. Mowing is a benign term when it comes to what they're doing out there, but it clears it. The sheep. So the sheep was a great idea. It was. If I can take a minute. When I came up here, it had been closed off. I don't know. Maybe it was in the 90s they did that, Donna. Yeah, it was early. And it was a partnership with us and UNH to
Did it
find
get your goat?
to find out if it was viable, fiscally responsible. Certainly, it seemed like it was responsible to take care of the right-of-ways that way, but whether it was fiscally responsible to do it that way. And 3 years of study, and it proved to not be at all, because the sheep wanted to eat forbs and weeds and grasses, not stuff that was ever going to come up into the power line. I've been trying to work with a cross between a sheep and a beaver, and if I can ever get that, we'll be able to put that out there. But you mentioned goats, and goats are being used for poison ivy control in Boston in the city parks, and it's worked out really well. But again, the stuff grows back, and with the sheep, with us, it just wasn't fast enough. They kept going back to the same area. They wouldn't move that far down the road. So. But one of the coolest things when I did, one of our guys, Steve Johnson, retired, and they sent over to me his vegetation management files, and the official top secret name of that was Operation Lamb Chop. So I thought that was kind of cool. Emergent work, so that's the type of work we don't have planned. Capital construction, when somebody comes in and wants to develop a new area. Customer requests, municipal partnering, as I mentioned, some of those trees that we take down are partnering with towns and state, and then outage investigations. So our outage investigations are something we do across 3 states in 2020. We did 1,110 outage investigations. This is outages caused by trees that knock power out to over 100 customers. So our arborists go out there, they look at the area, they decide what the tree caused, where it came from, and were there any other issues there that we didn't want the customers to have another outage just because there was a bad tree in the same zone. So what we found were 77% from outside the clearance zone, 60% from outside the zone are tree failures, 37% were limb breaks, 23% from inside the clearance zone, 50% were limb breaks, and 42% are tree failures. So one of the reasons we have them inside the zone is we don't have a truck that goes up high enough. We have 70-foot booms. but we really can't get much higher than that. So when we try and get ground to sky clearance on our ETT, it's limited by whatever equipment we have.
Representative McGee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Allen, for this lovely presentation. This just made me think of, we came for a visit at Eversource, and we took a look at the technology that allows folks to isolate,
Yep.
you know, the outages on the
Yep.
line. And I'm just curious how much that technology informs the work that you do, because it seems to me, when I look at this, you know, outage investigation piece, that you may have people who from that software would be able to say, oh, I know where that is. I mean, is it down to that kind of level?
It absolutely is, and we're working towards that, where we're going to start to look at, I never want to predict against Mother Nature, but we're going to try and figure out where we're having issues. And talking about Kyle Lombard from the state, we got his heat map on where the insect issues are in the state. We're overlaying that on our circuit map so we can see where we're going to trim next and figure out where there might be issues. We're also taking weather data
That's great.
from UConn. It's
That's
hopefully
exactly what I was thinking. It's
Yeah.
like, wow, if you can do that heat map signature and figure out where the trees are weak,
Yep.
that's terrific for you. I just wish you had more people, and I wish we could figure out some way to help it be a better paid profession, because that's true of a lot of the really most essential professions, is
Yep.
that they just don't
Yeah.
don't incent enough people to come into the profession.
Yep, and I think one of the issues is OSHA considers trees as part of waste management. So a tree worker is not even a profession in OSHA. We do have our own regulations, but
Wow.
it's never been classified as a high enough profession. So next one, this is usually important to a lot of people. This is the service wire, the line that comes into your house. We don't maintain that as part of our program work, and neither do any of the New England utilities. There was a time when we did. I remember having a pole saw in the back of my Chevy Chevette when I first got hired in 1987, and I would trim services for folks. But we will prune service if there's a hard contact. So if that wire should be going like this, and a branch makes it go like this or go like that, we'll trim that. We don't do removals for service wires, but in New Hampshire and Western Mass, the customer can arrange for the company to drop the service wire. So we'll come out, we'll knock it, we'll take it off the pole, take it off your house. You take your tree down, we put it back up, no charge. Connecticut and Eastern Mass, they're a little bit different. They want their money for doing something like that, but we're working on changing that. Yes?
Has that got something to do with ownership? Because in New Hampshire, PSNH, the company owns the service drop, whereas other states, the customer owns the service drop.
There are certainly situations like that where it changes throughout the state, yep. But we don't have enough outages on services to make it worthwhile for us to spend that kind of money that would take to maintain all the services. So we look at everyone. If you call in or your constituent calls in, we go out and look at it. And frankly, if they've got a good story, we'll probably do it. But it's not something we do as a part of the program. Emergency response. So as I said, we're a major part of any storm, and we've had a lot of storms over the last few years. One of the things that's difficult for us, and it's a positive, is that these storms that would have knocked us out for a week or 2 weeks in the past, due to the tree trimming we've done, due to the enhancements to our system, as you mentioned, they're not taking as much time to get them back in, which is great for our customers. It makes the storms not as recoverable for us. So we bring in a lot of crews to make sure we're not out of power for a long time, and then it becomes an issue trying to fight to get some of that back. But that's not for today. I just wanted to let you know that we've noticed there's more and more storms, that we've been very good at storm. That's when we shine. And I can't remember the last time. I think the ice storm in 2008 was the last time we were out for over a week. So vegetation management safety commitment. So every year we have an annual safety summit. The last 2 years obviously have been remote. But what we do is we bring all the contractors in. Usually they're safety people and their leadership. And we talk about what we can do to improve the safety of everybody that's out there. When I first started, we never talked, contractors never talked to each other. If somebody had an accident, you'd go, oh, those guys, they don't know what they're doing, they had an accident. Now it's so transparent, everybody's trying to help each other. And we make sure if, and this is a bad thing, I guess, somebody has the biggest accident of the year, the next year they have to present on it in front of everybody, which gives us lessons learned, after action review. It's better for everyone. And this, I'm very proud of the fact that we do this. We only started doing this about 5 or 6 years ago, and it's excellent. Customer and municipal contact. So Every year, we contact over 300,000 customers across the 3 states. Less than 1% of property owners do not allow the work to take place. So we track that. We also know where those refusals are. I don't have a whole lot of them in New Hampshire. And the law that was changed in September 2009, which went from a permission state to a opt-out notification state, has really helped an awful lot, and still gives people a chance to talk about it, to meet with us. They have 45 days to talk to us. It's a great law, but Connecticut doesn't have that same situation. They've got the most draconian and stuff going on down there. They've got about 5 different ways you can contact a customer that has the customer can change the specifications, and so they've run into a lot of problems down there. And I don't have any problem with customers saying, this is what I want done to my tree. That's how they should be. It's their tree. But it's become a lot more difficult to work down there than it is here and in Massachusetts. So this next thing is the mailer. This is what we send out to all our customers, and I think I brought some today. I have a bunch of handouts for you. But this gives people a chance to read it, what's going to happen. They tear a piece off, and then they send it back to us, and they can say, I want a consultation, I don't want you to trim, or everything's okay. Thought we might need some levity, so I put, imagine if trees gave off Wi-Fi signals. We'd be planting so many trees, we'd probably save the planet. Too bad they only produce the oxygen we breathe. So, yes.
Go ahead, Representative Callie Pitts.
Jackie's fine. On the oxygen, believe it or not, does your group in the company, or does the company sponsor any replanting programs so that people who have had their trees cut either know what they can plant so they won't have to go through that again, and maybe is there any incentive for people to plant again?
Sure. I think I might take you to every presentation because you're fitting right in with what I want to talk about. So this is great. Now, yes, we don't have a one-for-one tree replacement program, but we'll talk to you about certainly what should be planted there, and you'll see from some of our handouts that it's a very important part of what we do. So this is hardiness zones. This tells you what plants can grow where. So obviously we don't have palm trees in Florida, and we don't have white pine trees or we don't have palm trees in New Hampshire, we don't have white pine trees in Florida. But all 4 of these hardiness zones occur in New Hampshire. I think it's might be the only New Hampshire or New England state that has all 4. So that tells you what kind of trees we can deal with.
Representative Thomas has a question.
Thank you. Just real quick, going back, you were talking about my good friend from Portsmouth brought up the replanting thing. Could you, just as an example, I know there was an issue that happened during the Merrimack Valley Reliability Project where a particular household in my district was particularly hit hard, and I believe they either helped or they actually replanted trees and vegetation. If you are aware of that example, could you describe very quickly what the process was involved with that?
Sure. I'm not aware of that particular instance, but in general, if we're doing a major line like that, if we come to your property and we say we're going to change the way it looks, we'd add these trees out, those trees out, those shrubs, we will come back and talk about a planting plan so that everybody knows what's going to happen, what's coming out, and then what's going to go back in. And those are generally just on these big projects. When we're coming to your house to take down a tree, if it's one you really don't want to come down, even if it's in bad shape, and we want it down, there might be a negotiation where we could replant a tree for you. But as I said, we don't have a one-for-one. That would be very difficult to achieve for us as far as the budget goes. But that particular situation on a project, we always do that. If we're going to affect your property, we come and talk to you about how that's going to look and what it will look like in the future.
And do they do the planting, or is that up to the customer, to the owner?
Generally, we would do the planting, or one of our contractors were. There have been situations where we just drop off plants because that's what the customer wants. They either don't want to deal with us that way, they don't want us on their property that way, they just want the plants. So we'll do that. But we also have people who are very good at design and can, from a couple of our different contractors, and we have great relationships with our nurseries. We deal mostly with Milliken, which is a wholesale nursery in Chichester. But most of the trees we try and plant in New Hampshire are grown in New Hampshire. So,
Thank you.
yep. Tall growing native species. So these trees, all at maturity, can reach 50 feet or more. And they're all native trees, mostly native trees in our area. But our poles are usually 40 to 50 feet tall. So, as I said, I've been doing this for 40 years and I've never seen anything fall up. So Newton's law is still in effect. So if the trees are tall and our poles, they're going to come down, and if we're in the way, we're going to have an outage. So, and I'll talk a little bit further about smaller growing trees here in a minute. But acorns, there's always a lot of acorns. Oaks are a tremendous food source for our squirrels and turkeys and deer. And 4 of these species here you'll find in New Hampshire. The 5th one, overcup. Probably only if you go to my house you'll find that one. But mad horse. I'm going to try and do a little backyard botany here, and I hope you guys don't mind. So for trees that drop their leaves, deciduous trees, there's only 2 types of branching structure. And if that diagram on the left will show you, it's either opposite, so wherever there's one branch, there's one directly opposite, or alternate. There's one here, there's one here, there's one here. Those are the only 2 ways that deciduous trees grow. So mad horse is an acronym. Maple, ash, dogwood, and horse chestnut are the only trees that grow alternate, or that grow opposite. Alternate is everything else. Elm, hickory, birch, beech, apple, cherry, they're all alternate. But mad horse is opposite branching trees. So what does that help you with? Well, in the winter, when we don't have leaves on the trees, it can help us talk to a customer who wants to know what type of tree it is, or help our guys know this tree's going to grow this fast or that fast because it's this type of tree. It helps them a little bit. And then to the right, we have what's known as a compound leaf. So that would be your nut trees, your hickories and walnuts are the first ones I think of with compound leaves. But that whole thing, that whole is a leaf. And those are all leaflets. So those are opposite, those leaflets, but that's not part of it. The leaf itself is actually alternate. So there's 2 types of compound leaves. There's pinnate, which I'm showing in this, which is like a feather is pinnate, and palmate would be like your hand, and that's how a horse chestnut or a buckeye grows. So there's 5 leaves coming out just like your hand. There's also a couple tricks for spruce fir and hemlock. So when you think about Christmas trees, seasonal trees, December trees, however you want to call it, they tend to be pyramidal. And our native white pine is not necessarily that shape. It's a tall growing tree with a big trunk. But the ones that are pyramidal are usually spruce and fir, sometimes hemlock. So a spruce tree, the cones hang down. And a fir tree, the cones go up. So if you're driving by a bunch of trees and you go, I wonder what those are. They look like spruce. And then you see the cones are going up. It's a fir tree. And it took me about 20 years to figure that out. But hemlock, the cones are always going to be on the end of the branches, as I show in that bottom right. So that's just also another way to tell is if you put your open hand on the needles of a spruce tree, you're going to feel it. It's going to be prickly. If you do it on a fir tree, it's going to be very soft. I put this in just because we've experienced this pandemic for the last couple of years, and a lot of people did stay home. So perhaps the most radical thing we can do is stay at home so we can learn the names of the plants and animals around us so we can begin to know what the tradition is we're part of. One of the things that happened with the pandemic is there were more plant sales at nurseries than ever before. And it's harder to get plants of any size. It's hard to get a lot of landscape material, which is a tremendous thing, that more people are getting involved in planting and taking care of their stuff. But it's harder for us when we go to plant a tree. There's just not as much stock available to us. So you've always heard that thing, be careful what you wish for or what you ask for. I asked one of our admins to find the picture on the internet that looked like me. And so that's Hillbilly Jim. He was a wrestler, and he's now, I think he's a disc jockey in outlaw country. But anyhow, he's smiling, and I'm usually smiling, so that's good. So the 2 most commonly asked questions, why do oaks hold on to their leaves, and why are there so many acorns this year? And I'm going to answer. Sure. So the next one is, the next slide is, why do oaks hold their leaves? So they're marcescent, and what that means is that they hold on to their leaves. That's basically all that means. They're part of Fagaceae, which is the beech family. Oaks are part of the beech family, so beech will hold their leaves too. There's a book that came out last year by Dr. Doug Tallamy called The Nature of Oaks. He's a professor down in Maryland. He's written a lot of plant books, a lot of native books, and he's an entomologist by trade, but he's really become a hero in the native plant movement. And he says there's 3 reasons that oaks hold on to their leaves. Now, oaks and beech were also southern plants long before our forefathers ever thought about this country. But as things have changed, they've come north. So the first thing he says is dinosaur browse. So as the dinosaurs went to eat the leaves, the tree, as a defense mechanism, left its leaves on so they would not be as tasty. And if you look at oak trees, oftentimes the top is bare, but the bottom third has leaves on it. And his feeling was that that was the height of which the dinosaurs would do it. Now, I don't know anybody that was a witness to that, so I can't say that he was right or wrong, but it makes sense to me. The next thing is snow retention. So as the snow comes down through the trees, if it lands on leaves that are still there, when it melts, it goes right into the root system. So again, instead of blowing all over the place, it's possibly another defense or just evolution of the plant to try and make things better for it. And then lastly, spring nutrients. When those leaves do finally come off, as the new leaf comes out, it pushes the abscission layer to drop the leaf. It lands right below the tree. And it goes right into for fertilization and nitrogen.
No, it doesn't. It lands on my driveway or my lawn. I have 5 giant oak trees on my property, and I spend a quarter of the year moving oak leaves.
Oak
drives me crazy.
Oak drops something every day of the year. There's never a day that goes by that doesn't drop something. So that's the answer for why they hold their leaves, according to Dr. Tallamy. And I've been doing this a long time, and I think it's probably as close to the truth as any other. I don't know if I'm supposed to. Got a couple people raising their hands.
Use your microphone, Rod, please.
Is bittersweet an issue for your power lines?
It's an issue for the poles. So Oriental bittersweet is the invasive species. There is an American bittersweet that doesn't really cause much problem, but the Oriental is a very fast-growing plant, grows up the poles, gets into the transformer, and can cause an outage. My guys, the tree contractors, can only cut it when it's below the wire zone, if you will. So going around every 4 or 5 years to do our trimming, this thing is a very aggressive grower, so it does become a problem. We do this mid-cycle program every 2 years to look for it. But that's the biggest problem we have with vines is Oriental bittersweet.
John?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. While we're on the subject, I think it was 2 years ago, we had massive numbers of white pine cones and stink bugs. And do you have any explanation for that?
So the pine cones I can talk a little bit about, but the stink bugs, yeah. So I think that's just a cyclical insect, like a lot of them are. But I don't know that was a specific year for them. Where do you live? Oh, okay. Well, I'm in New Ipswich, so not too far away. So I'll have to take a look. But I don't recall anything like that, getting calls about that particular bug.
Oh, I'm sure it's not. It's just that you know stuff that we don't, and this was an opportunity.
Oh, thank you. That's kind of you. So the cones and the acorns, what we call a mast year. So a mast year is, if you read these bullets, the fruits, nuts, berries, buds, and so on produced by trees and bushes are called mast. Hard mast includes walnuts, pecans, hickory nuts, hard seeds, and acorns. Soft mast includes berries, fruits, buds, and even rose hips. But we include pine cones in that as far as hard mast. So why do we have the mast year every few years? This takes a little bit of a leap, but the trees do talk to each other. And there's been a lot of books that come out about that in the last few years. Finding the Mother Tree was on the bestseller list for a long time by Suzanne Simard, and there's a lot of that stuff in there, The Secret Life of Trees. All this talks about how the roots are intertwined and they send signals to each other. If there's a bug affecting one or if it's dying, it might send out some nutrients and hopefully it goes out into the community. I believe it. I'm not a scientist. I believe it. It seems to make sense to me because I know the root zone is a very important zone. So why do we have a mast year? The trees signal to each other that they need to put out more fruit in any given year. The reason being is that Mother Nature will always adjust. So if they put out the same amount of acorns every single year, then the squirrels, the deer, the turkey, the blue jays, blue jays are a big acorn feeder, which I didn't know. They will create enough young to eat all the acorns. So if it's always 100 acorns from this tree, they'll create enough young to delete those 100 acorns. So Mother Nature says, well, sometimes we have to just send out 1,000 acorns where we used to send out 100. And that ensures that after everything gets eaten, there'll still be enough for regeneration. So something will grow up from those seeds. Additionally, the squirrels maybe say, hey, Mardi Gras time, so they have more kids, and then the next year we don't put out as many acorns. So then there's a struggle between the young and the old, and maybe that gets that population back under control. So it's a very interesting scientific dynamic. I wish I was an expert in it because I think it's a really cool thing, but to me that's the answer, is that Mother Nature's saying we need to make sure we can regenerate this species.
Or we get a squirrel apocalypse like we had
Right.
4 or 5 years ago.
Right,
Remember that?
absolutely, and that was based on the mast year. So. Yeah. Yep. It's amazing.
I tell you, I think that explanation is nuts.
Jose?
Yes, on the Squirrel Mageddon, I've been in the state for a long time. I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah.
Do you recall in your experience? So and was it in fact a bad mast year that year?
We had a couple of mast years in the teens, and because I had to explain it at my work about why there were so many cones, and I didn't have as much info now as I do for you folks, but so squirrels are obviously proliferate. They're gonna keep growing, and when the climate's right and when there's other things right, there's not as many predators for them. They'll just continue to get out of control, and Mother Nature finds a way. I don't know if it was by vehicles, but they did take care of it. So I do have squirrels on my tie today too. So but blue jays can carry 5 acorns in their gullet. I never would have thought that. And they tend to plant more oak trees than squirrels do. So, getting to the planting the right tree in the right space, the average median house size has increased by 62% over time. So in 1973, the average house in America was 1,660 square feet. 2015, it was 2,687 square feet. So what that means is it's taking up more of the lot. And as it takes up more of the lot, there's less chance for large trees to be there. Now, large trees are great. I call them noble trees. There's always good to see noble trees around. It's New England's built on having large trees, and our foliage industry is usually from large trees, but or trees that can be reliable year after year with fall color. But when it comes to power lines and house size, smaller trees are better for us near the power lines. So I included a thing that I found to be the best thing I've ever read on planting trees. So this I won't go over, but it's something you can look at if you're ever going to plant a tree. One thing that I've been very proud of at Eversource is after working here a long time, and I've been arguing as an arborist that we needed to do something on planting the right tree in the right place, replanting trees when we can. Looking at situations where if we're going to trim these trees every year, wouldn't it be better if we didn't have those trees there and we had trees that only grew up so tall? And you can't make it all be like a Lego set where you have this on one side and that on the other, but you can try and work with it. And when you take a tree down that's too big, maybe suggest putting a smaller tree in. So I was able to build a 2 sections, utility arboretum over at the Urban Forestry Center in Portsmouth after they had a big windstorm, about 2012, I think it was. and they lost all their spruce trees. I was on the Community Forest Advisory Council for the state, and it said, should we do here? And why don't we try utility arboretum? So we put two poles in with one line, dead, planted trees that would grow near the wires. So instead of going on the internet and looking at this little tree and saying, I want that, you actually get to go there 52 weeks a year if you want and see how that tree grows and what it looks like near the wires. So it was only 10 trees. So we had, as you know, we used to be Public Service New Hampshire and part of Northeast Utilities. We combined with NSTAR, became Eversource. My boss at the time, Vera Admore-Sacchi, didn't know much about trees, but she was the best boss I ever had. She knew what she knew and she knew what she didn't know, and she gave us the chance to show her what she didn't know and try and learn and try and help us. And she was just fantastic, a very humane person. And we had a all-hands meeting at the Portsmouth Urban Forestry Center. And I was supervisor in New Hampshire at that time, and she said, I love this, I want you to do it in Connecticut and Massachusetts. And I said, well, I only cover New Hampshire, I don't see how I'm gonna get that done. She said, you'll figure it out. And to her credit, she then gave me Massachusetts to deal with for 5 years, and I got one built down at UMass. And we built one at Hooksett 2 years ago, which Representative Plett came and went on a tour with us last year. But what it is we have 4 of them now. 3 of them are de-energized lines. So we can have safety days there, we can have training days there. People can bring their bucket trucks in and teach guys how to work near the wires without having a problem. The one in Hooksett is a live line, but that's where my office is, and I decided I want to take advantage of being here every day, and we planted, we got over 60 trees there. So what we've done is try and put species that only grow 30 feet tall. As I said, our poles are 40 to 50 feet tall. And we've also brought some species up from the mid-Atlantic states to see if there is a climate change issue. If there isn't, I don't know, but we'll try them here and see how they do. We put something called a Crepe Myrtle, which people have maybe seen if they've gone down south. At the UMass one, it grows up every year, it dies every winter, goes down, comes back the next spring, goes up. We never thought it would do that. So the research has been good there. We have something called a Chinese fringe tree at our Hooksett site, and there's a native fringe tree, which some people call old man's beard. It's got hanging white flowers in the spring. It's more of a shrub, but the Chinese fringe tree is supposed to be zone 6, and that's not supposed to be in New Hampshire, but it's here, and it's doing all right. So that type of thing, it doesn't cost the company really anything to try and do this. We're working with our contractors. They donated a lot of the time and the effort and the plants to have this nice space. So we'd love to have you folks come down and do a tour if you'd like to see it at some point. It's right down in Hooksett on Legends Drive, and I'll be glad to host that and show you what we've done. But as we continue to do this, we research and see if there's other plants that will grow up in New Hampshire, which gives us a chance to get away from having an ash species go away or an elm species go away. And have I gone over time?
Well, we're getting fairly close to the end of our time.
Okay.
Rod,
Another question for you concerning choosing these different trees that you're dealing with. One of them you mentioned was a Chinese fringe tree.
Yeah.
That's not native?
It's not native.
And are there concerns about something like that?
Sure, there's
becoming
always
an invasive.
Well, it's not an invasive, but it's not native. So the difference is some plants are invasive that are not natives. However, I've got a poster, 30 under 30 trees only go 30 feet tall. I sent it out to 1,200 garden centers and nurseries. It has Japanese maple on it. Japanese maple is one of the most highly planted trees in the United States. It's a very nice ornamental little tree, red leaves, green leaves. Lots of people have it. My feeling was if I tell the landscapers and nursery industry that we don't want you selling that anymore, it's really going to impact them economically. And so there are some native trees that are on our utility arboretum. There's some non-native trees. But there's nothing that really hasn't been in the trade for decades. We're not bringing anything new in. They say, oh, we've never tried this before. Let's bring it to the United States. We're not doing that. So, and I'll zip through this. So we have 4 arboretum locations, UMass, Portsmouth, Hooksett, and Berlin, Connecticut. I put together this 30 under 30, which is the poster I sent out, and you folks have a copy today. Just shows you the trees that will grow that we suggested plant near the wires. Next slide is of 2 books. Dr. Michael Durr, who gave us the photos for that poster, And that's great if you're looking at landscape plants. If you want to learn what kind of trees you have near your property, the field guide from Audubon Society is a better option. I put this in. I hope you don't think it's pandering to the audience, but Dudley Orr, the first Attorney General of New Hampshire, had this quote, and I thought it was really an excellent quote. As you get older, you don't sleep as much. While I lie awake, I think about what good things I can do for people. So one of the things I think about is how can I get people to plant the right tree in the right place? And that's something we've really worked on. And I'll finish with a much younger me who was able to still climb trees saying thank you.
Thank you. That was a wonderful presentation.
So,
Thank you. I would encourage members, if you have further questions, if Mr. Allen can stay for a few minutes, you can speak with him. But I'm going to call the official meeting to an end for today. And thank you, Mr. Allen and Ms. Gamache, again for being here.
thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the whole committee. I appreciate being able to share this with you.
Thank you.
That was outstanding.
All right, so we're done for the day. We'll see you all on Thursday in Reps Hall. Take care.